At best, I may put it as a means to give an excuse for not paying. If the NLNG obeys the laws of the land, which it is subject to, and every foreign company investing in Nigeria is primarily subject to obeying the laws which are set out in the land. If it does obey the laws of the land, there will be no issues whatsoever. No issues relating to compromise of investments or the like. And I must tell you, the investment on NLNG has been realized several times over the last 15 years. As I said at the beginning, NLNG is statistically the most successful company in Nigeria today. So it really begs the question, well, why such a company would say, as it has said in very express terms, that it is not subject to payment of taxes or levies in Nigeria in perpetuity. That's what it's saying. What they say? That's what NLNG is saying. That in perpetuity, they are not subject to payment of any levies or taxes by any regulatory agency in perpetuity. I think that's a slap on the face of Nigerians across board.
But the thing about this now is that now that the ministers, some of them are wading into this matter, but what's the current situation now? Has it been lifted, the blockade?
I am told that NMASA has lifted the blockade and has been invited to a meeting by government towards resolving this issue, because government believes that it's important that the NLNG is made to face its responsibilities, but at the same time, government doesn't want any untoward implications or perceptions to be read into the matter. So that's the information I have as of this morning.
Okay, so now when they negotiate, some of these matters will pop up. Like you said, they want not to pay tax in perpetuity. They think that the NLNG Act exempts them. But do you say, no, if you reach that threshold, you should pay? Now, if they negotiate and they all come to an agreement now, what's going to be the guarantee that tomorrow this feud might not pop up again?
I would say there's no guarantee. And the reason is very simple. If NMASA, as a responsible regulatory agency, is to do its work as set out in its legislation, it must take steps to enforce its mandates. And if its mandate includes detention of vessels which are not complying with existing laws, I believe it should do so. Okay? So I think what has happened is that this is the very first time this kind of step has been taken. And I believe NLNG would probably step a bit down from its high horse and begin to look at the situation a bit more soberly. I believe that's what's going to happen. But if it does continue, there's no, I mean, if I were in the NMASA's position, there's no reason why I would not take steps towards enforcing my mandate.
You know, because part of what some may think is the meaning they're trying to communicate from their release, which NLNG put up over the weekend, was that the NMASA resorted to this self-help matter and that you had gone to court but withdrew the matter from court. So they're giving the impression, correct me if it could be wrong though, but it comes across as though they say, if the NMASA had insisted, gone to court, get a judgment, you have nobody else to come and challenge all of that, because, I mean...
and that's why I emphasize, there is absolutely nothing like self. Enforcing your mandate as exists in your statutory legislation is not self-help. There's no question of self-help here. In fact, if anything, I would believe that the right step for NLNG to take, if it disagrees with existing legislation, would be for NLNG on its own volition to obey and then go to court to challenge that legislation. NLNG has refused to do that.
I find it a little curious, because you did mention, right now I'm staring at the Nigeria LNG Fiscal Incentives, Guarantees and Assurance Act. And I can see that part where you actually did talk about tax relief. Number 2 stipulates this tax relief period. It says, notwithstanding the provisions of Section 10 of the Industrial Development Income Tax Relief Act, the tax relief period of the company shall commence on the production day of the company and shall continue for a period of 10 years. So, however, that the tax relief period shall terminate at the first anniversary date after the first 5 years, when the cumulative average sales price of liquefied natural gas reaches $3 as calculated in the first schedule to this act. Now, it clearly stipulates when it will stop, when it will start paying tax. But, I mean, it doesn't talk about when it will start paying. Is it customs duties in the NMASA is trying to collect?
NMASA is collecting levies, yes, statutory levies.
Statutory levies.
Yes.
It doesn't say anything about statutory levies, and you have testified that the NLNG is actually paying tax to FIRS.
Okay.
So if there's something, are you sure that there is something that we're not missing here that, you know, that the NLNG has seen and is capitalizing on?
Yes, I know what they're capitalizing on. If you go further somewhere in that act, it makes provision that the NLNG shall be exempt from the taxes leviable under the National Shipping Policy Act. Now, the National Shipping Policy Act of 1987 was the act which set up the then National Maritime Authority. Okay? That act was repealed in 2007 and replaced by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency Act, the NMASA Act. So, the specific provision on which they're relying in the NLNG Act is what I've just told you about, and it was repealed in 2007. Okay? So there's no basis, no legal basis for them to continue living in that belief.
So you say you've had this running battle for how long now?
It's been on essentially since the establishment of NLNG, but very particularly since 2007, when very firm and direct demands were made for payments.
So since 2007, when they married the Shipping Act and was replaced with the NMASA Act,
yes,
that's when you've had this battle with NLNG. It seems it's getting to a head right now.
Absolutely.
Why you did mention that you went to court, and NMASA presented its case in court. What exactly transpired in court?
NMASA didn't have to go to court. As I said, NLNG should have gone to court. But in the course of discussions between the parties, NLNG again brought this as legislation and said that, okay, that it is very happy to pay, but that it will only pay if the court interprets this matter. NMASA did not want to take the steps it has taken today, which it could have taken at the time. So NMASA, and NLNG said it was very willing. NMASA, on its own volition, went to court. NLNG, as opposed to what it had postured that it was willing to let the court decide, refused to accept any service. Refused to accept any service. So, and those are matters which are on record.
Yeah, but the thing about this is that if the former DG of the NMASA tried to collect these levies and NLNG didn't pay at the time, and now the government authorities are coming in to negotiate, if there are disputes on this from the point of law, the court is the best place to sort this out.
The court may be the best place from an NLNG perspective, and NLNG should take that step. NLNG wants to eat its cake and have it. That's what it's doing. NLNG wants to exploit the timidity of some establishments because by virtue of NLNG being such a huge establishment with contacts across several levels. NLNG is playing the typical colonial mentality where you intimidate the people around you, and on the basis of that intimidation, you are able to do whatever you like. That is the NLNG disposition. NLNG is coming at this from a position, in fact, if I may point out, this NLNG Act was an act which was passed, was a decree, or was a military decree. NLNG Act was a military decree. By purporting at some point to say that you are not subject to any taxes whatsoever in perpetuity, what you're essentially saying is that the National Assembly of Nigeria and the structure of governance in Nigeria is forever under your boots.
Have you presented this case? I mean, if it's something that has to do with their laws, or a couple of laws that they are capitalizing on, have you sought the input of the National Assembly into this as well?
I want to believe that NMASA's mandate is very clear under its act. Okay? If there's anybody who should be trying to seek judicial interpretation or intervention from any part of the country, it should be NLNG. No regulatory agency in Nigeria should be intimidated in carrying out its statutory responsibility by any organization whatsoever. But in direct answer to your question, the National Assembly has indeed intervened on this matter. If you look at reports as of recently as maybe 2008, 2009, you will see that the National Assembly intervened in this matter and actually made very clear declarations. A very specific committee, the House Committee on Gas Resources, at some point made clear interventions and required that NLNG comply with the directives.
In very clear terms, you know, what exactly are you going to be doing next? Because some people will still maintain that if NMASA had gone to court and stayed there, the NLNG would not only have to pay the tax or the levies that NMASA wants to collect, it most likely would also be liable or subject to paying fines
it is
for
liable
refusing
to pay
to pay its levies.
This matter is not a judicial matter. It is a regulatory matter. It may only become a judicial matter if the party which is subject to obeying with the laws disagrees with the laws. In that case, the step that party takes is to go to the court to obtain a declaration. It is not for the party that has a right to enforce laws to begin to pick and choose. In fact, what they're telling NMASA to do is, okay, NLNG, all companies which complain about the law, NMASA should just relax, and yet the same country will turn back and say NMASA is not enforcing a statutory responsibility. EFCC does not go to court to go and get a declaration from the court on whether or not it's entitled to investigate matters, or whether or not it's entitled to investigate certain people.
So it was a wrong move for NMASA to have gone to court in the first place?
It was not a wrong move.
Miscalculated.
But it was a move which was goaded on by NLNG in a deception that it was going to cooperate with the circumstances. It was an option. The NMASA exercised an option amongst several options at the time.
But since all of this argument is based on something that you know that the NLNG is hanging on to, something in law, someone would say that the courts is just the best place to sort it out.
No. Why? Maybe that question should have been put to NLNG. Why, in the face of a legislation, would they refuse to obey the legislation as opposed to obey the legislation and going on to court to challenge that legislation? Okay, and it's very important that we get the regulatory framework of this country in perspective, because that is at the core of good governance in the country.
Okay, tell us, what happened the last time where the former DG tried to get NLNG to pay, and how it ended?
To the best of my knowledge, the past administration of NMASA did not go out to enforce the law. They were negotiating and trying to find a soft landing for NLNG. They did not go out to enforce the law. So this current administration has gone out to enforce the law, the letter of the law.
All right. So who knows how all of this went. So we'll wait and see what comes up from that negotiation, which the government authorities are going to get into now. We understand they've waded in, as you confirmed.
And by the way, we invited NLNG.
Oh, yeah, and well, they're not here yet, so we still hope that they come forward and speak up on this if they really don't want to pay tax in perpetuity, you say?
In perpetuity.
Amazing. All right, then Meka Akagwa goes to counsel to NMASA. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
All right.